Your Excellency, the Somali federal government has been intensifying its efforts to counter organized crime and terrorism in your country. Could you please elaborate on the advances that have been made in this regard in the past years, as well as cooperation with neighboring countries in the Horn of Africa that has been particularly important to your country in this regard? We really look forward to hearing your experience and your perspective. So over to you, Minister.
Thank you, Steve. First, let me extend my gratitude to ADF, Antalya Diplomatic Forum, for providing this platform where these many esteemed members of the diplomatic corps in the different world came around and talked on this issue. As I'm from Somalia, a country which have deeply affected by the terrorism, I've been struggling for the past 17 years and still struggling. And it's very important for us to have this kind of forum to navigate and discuss. Diplomacy is not only a tool for counterterrorism, but it's also a tool for preventing terrorism to happen. Terrorism doesn't happen overnight. No one is radicalized overnight. Things happen through time. And that time, if diplomacy is applied appropriately, it can be prevented and it can be minimized, its impact in the long term. If I look Somalia, how the terrorism initiated. In 1990, we had a failed government. Our government has collapsed. It took about 16 years where it was struggling. We had a localized administration. We didn't have a complete government. Then after 9/11, many of you remember the whole world became anti-counterterrorism. So many countries jumped the bandwagon of the counterterrorism and did try to apply where it doesn't fit. So Somalia was invaded by 2006 by Ethiopian forces with the support of many international organizations because of the fear of terrorism. But that resulted in the death of about 20,000 Somalis and many orphans and many angry people. That was the root cause of what we today call Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab today is one of the well-funded, well-organized, most potent organization in the world as a terrorism. And its root cause was that invasion. Before that, Somalia didn't have any single terrorism at that time. But because of failure of policy, failure of diplomacy, has resulted in the emergence of one of the worst a terror group in Africa or even in the world. So failure of diplomacy also is a result of many things happen. At the same time, terrorism has no borders. So you cannot fix terrorism in one nation without having a diplomatic balance with other concerned stakeholders. So also diplomacy is needed to resolve to come against the terror group. In Somalia, for the past 2 years, since the return of Hassan Sheikh in power, we have applied a diplomacy in many ways. Number one, we reach out our partners. We form a different platforms that we bring many of our close allies to help us gather resources and political backing. For example, we have a forum we call Quint, which has 5 members, and including Turkey and Qatar and UAE and US and UK. They help us political support. Also, they provide us a security assistance at the same time. Secondly, we reach out our neighbors, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Djibouti. We bring them back to Mogadishu. We say, we have this menace. It will impact one way or the other, all of us. Why don't you help us here in Somalia so we can degrade and defeat, so you will not have any problems. So we form a forum called Black Lion, and still is in progress. Similarly, we reach out our other partners that we may have had some difficulties in the past, because you need to have many friends as much as possible to overcome the challenge of a terrorism. So terrorism, in a nutshell, came out, it's born from a grievances, it's born from a failed government, it's born from a lack of justice, and etc. So we need to prevent, in order those kind of a condition to exist, so that they can be radicalized and they can be cultivated. So the politicians and diplomats have a role to play. Catching up, countering is good, but the better is to prevent in the first hand. So if we can create a better political environment, that will minimize the existence of terror groups.
You spoke about how Somalia uses diplomacy. I think you talked about working with the region, the neighbors, different partners. You also talked about diplomacy as a prevention or a preventive tool. If we're just following on about what Ambassador Yazgan said at the end, if we're thinking about how to make diplomacy more inclusive, more invigorated, more able, what do you need from diplomacy? And what would you suggest as a diplomatic approach?
I mean, firstly, to counter terrorism, you need different tools. For example, when Hassan came back to the administration, the initial thinking was how we can fight terrorism comprehensively. In the past, we used to have a military fighting with the terrorism, and then the public being a neutral, waiting who is winning. But after his return, we came back with three-tier policies that all needed also diplomacy. Number one was why we have this terrorism, what they are using as a tool, what they're using as a reason, which was the Islam. They were using the religion as a reason of their fighting. So we gathered and invited around 300 scholars, Islamic scholars, whom many of them used to align with that group initially, but now figured out that was wrong. And that group came out with a fatwa to delegitimize the actions and the existence of this group. So that created that this group is illegitimate, and that this group are fighting something that's not right in the eyes of the Somalis. So that was one tier. The second tier was this group had a lot of financial resources. They were gathering revenue from the public, what they call zakawat, what they call many other tools. Then we fight with the source of revenue and also with the tools they were using, whether it's a bank, whether it's a remittances, whether any other means, so to minimize the revenue collection. And the third one was to continue the fighting. In order to fight, you need resources, you need training, you need weapon, you need political backing. Somalia had the longest ever arms embargo imposed to a country in the world. It was 32 years old. So to lift that embargo, you have to use a lot of diplomatic muscle. You have to reach out to your partners. So at the end, the last December was that embargo was lifted. The second issue we had was Somalia also had what we call a HEBIC system, HEBIC process, which is because you cannot deal with the banks until you are forgiven or until you repay. So also we have to use a diplomatic means to get our partners to help us also continue. But at the same time, if you look like Al-Shabaab in Somalia, always you have to analyze and see what the terror group are. We can categorize into three categories. Roughly, they are about 10 to 15,000 in number. About 20% or less are real ideologue, people who have the understanding what they want. The remaining are there either a group that are grievances from the invasion, grievances from maybe they are minority within the bigger clan. So those grievances need a different resolution. And also a group that are since the unemployment is very high, there are many people who have no other means of a good job. So they join with the third group. So that means if there's other means that they can get their livelihood, they will get out from that process. So you need a diplomacy also to create an economic opportunity where people can get employed, where people can get fair judgment in terms of legal rights and etc. So diplomacy is all over the place. So I mean, it's a tool that you can use in different means.
My question will be for His Excellency Minister Ali Mohammed Omar. So I would like to ask Mr. Minister, what is the significance of defense collaboration pacts recently signed between Somalia and Turkey for your country, and how is it significant for fighting terrorism?
Thank you very much. The second question is going to be for Sir here. There's only one. You can pass it maybe through the audience to save time. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much. I am Ambassador Leonard Boyo, Ambassador of Kenya in Turkey. I can relate very well to what the Honorable Minister from Somalia has been submitting because we share a similar problem. But my question is the lack of consensus on how we conceptualize terrorism a hindrance to a diplomatic approach to resolving the problem? And added to that, is there any space for engaging these groups as part of the diplomatic approach?
No, thank you for the question about the defense and economic development agreement, with Turkey was being negotiated for some time. Turkey was helping Somalis to rebuild its security forces. In the past 10 years, many Somalis were trained here in Turkey and also in Somalia. So Turkey was part of the Somalis, was contributing the part of Somalis rebuilding its security forces. And this is another layer. Somalia has the longest coastal line in Africa, almost 3,300 kilometers. And we used to have our own maritime security in the 80s and 70s. But due to the failure of government in 1989, 1990, we lost that maritime security. For the past 30 years, Somali maritime was being looted, dumped west, and has done all kind of illegal activity, including the piracy. So Somalia wants to rebuild its maritime security, and this agreement is focusing mainly in rebuilding Somalia's maritime security. Somalia to guard its resources, because the potential economic development of Somalia is on the sea, whether it's the blue economy, whether it's the fishing or oil or anything else there. So this defense agreement focuses rebuilding Somalia's maritime security. The other question was the engagement of the terrorists. I mean, always, all wars end with negotiation. I mean, definitely, there's a room for that. But also, there's a time that you can negotiate and there's time that you cannot negotiate. So at this time, what we see is while the terror group is on the rise, it's very hard to negotiate when they need first to figure out that their only option is to a negotiation. At this time, they are not. We have been looking many times, but we don't see a window of negotiation yet that they are ready. So hopefully, when the time comes, that will happen.